Good evening and welcome. My name is Joel Reitman, and I am the co-chair of cija, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, the advocacy agent for the Jewish Federations of Canada. The Canadian Jewish community is gathered tonight in solidarity and outrage. Over the past 2 weeks, we have watched with shock as our fellow Jews in Israel have been subjected to attack at the hands of Hamas, a terrorist organization bent on the destruction and obliteration of the Jewish state of Israel and the murder of Israelis. And our sorrow and compassion is extended also to Hamas victims in Gaza, where Hamas has embedded its terrorist infrastructure within densely populated areas, deliberately putting the people of Gaza in harm's way, and where a third of Hamas missiles have fallen, taking many innocent lives. Our outrage has deepened as the violence on our television screens has spilled over into violence and threats of violence directed against Jews in our streets, in our communities, online, and in our places of business, our schools, and our houses of worship. Never has it been more clear the Jewish people, whether we live in Canada or in Israel, must stand as one. Never has it been more clear that the ancient hatred of antisemitism does not distinguish between a Jew in Tel Aviv or a Jew in Toronto. We are all targets. We know that what starts with Jews never ends with Jews. The violence and threats of violence that we have seen in the last few days threatens not just our well-being and safety, but the very fabric and foundation of Canadian life. Tonight, we meet in solidarity, in sadness, and in resolute commitment to action. We will not be intimidated. We will not be discouraged. We will call out the perpetrators of violence, and we will call on our many friends to stand with us, and we will act together. And together with our fellow Canadians right across this country, we say enough. We know where anti-Semitism leads if left unchecked. We know what must be done to stop it. And together, stop it we will. cija has produced a comprehensive toolkit that can help each of you take action together. Please check the website address that we will show you at the end of this rally. We are asking each and every person on this call to visit the website, choose an area, and to pick an action to take. Whether it's as simple as purchasing an Israeli-made product using your account to help counter the relentless anti-Israeli messages on social media, or writing to our Prime Minister to demand action. Each of us can and must do this. Whether we are Jews living in Thornhill, Toronto, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Montreal, Hamilton, Fredericton, Halifax, Ottawa, and yes, even the Yukon, we all must join together and do our part. Thank you. Our first speaker this evening is Naomi Rosenfeld, Executive Director of the Atlantic Jewish Communities. Naomi.
Thank you so much, Joel, and thank you to cija for organizing this important event and for giving me the honor of speaking to you all tonight. Friends, it has been a very scary 2 weeks, and not just because of what we've seen going on in Israel, but because of what's happening right here at home. Frankly, it has been a scary week to be a Zionist here in Canada. It has been a scary week to be an Israeli, and it has been a scary week to be a Jew. In my community in Atlantic Canada, we have seen this firsthand. We have seen hate speech being spewed on social media. And when people from our community dared to respond, they received direct threats to both them and their families. We've seen vandalism, both graffiti of Israeli flags publicly in our community, as well as graffiti on the ads of Jewish-owned businesses. We've seen Jewish and Israeli-owned businesses targeted because their business owners dared to speak positively about Israel on social media. Across Canada, things have not been good either. We've seen anti-Israel rallies spilling over into anti-Jewish hate fests. We've seen students as the targets of social media and social sunning with condemnation of Israel and Zionism, the price that these students must pay to be admitted to social clubs, networks, and their own personal relationships. We've seen Jews being threatened and harassed in their own neighborhoods. We've seen schools and students threatened, and we've even seen people in our community taking down their own mezuzahs because they are afraid to be Jewish in public. And with all this hatred and fear, I hope that we all remember three things. One, it has never been more apparent why we need Israel and why we need a strong Jewish state. Two, if any of you have been going through any of the things that I've mentioned, please know that you are not alone. We stand together, a community here to support one another through each of these events. And finally, as a national Canadian Jewish community, we must remain strong and resilient. We will not cower to fear, and we will not hide our true identities and who we are. I now have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Gil Troy. Gil Troy is a distinguished scholar of North American history at McGill University and the author of 9 books on American history and 3 books on Zionism, including the renewed classic, The Zionist Ideas. His book, Never Alone, Prison, Politics, and My People, co-authored with Natan Sharansky, was just published by Public Affairs of Hatchet. He is a regular columnist for the Jerusalem Post and was featured as a commentator on CNN's Emmy-winning Decade series, the 80s, then the 90s, and most recently, the 2000s. Gil is joining us tonight from the middle of the night in Jerusalem. Gil, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Erev Tov. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, cija, for organizing this. I literally, just as this was starting, got a buzz on these wonderful phones that we live by. My application announced that at 2 o'clock, there's now a ceasefire. And I say it with great emotion because it means that my son Yoni is going to be coming home after 12 days on the Gaza border in headquarters. We've been boasting for this war about living in vaccination nation. And we had finally, after all this very difficult COVID period, through a tremendous amount of social trust, through many of the strength of Israel, the sense of community, of solidarity, of never leaving anyone behind, of being committed to all people getting vaccinations. Do you know who gave me a vaccination? An Israeli Arab nurse who's a male. We just call that a nurse here in Israel, as you do in Canada. And as part of this leaving the COVID bubble, we taken our first trip abroad for a family wedding. Sunday night, I flew home with Yoni and my daughter Leah. Monday morning, he's working as a teacher's aide because he left the army 2 months ago. He went all the way up from our home in Jerusalem to Kiryat Shmona, and the bomb started. And he picked up the phone and he called his old commander. He's not yet in reserves. There's no structure yet for him to fit into the Israeli army, to fit back into the Israeli army. But he picked up the phone and he said, "Do you need help?" And the guy said, "If you're asking, come on down." And so he drove all the way down from Kiryat Shmona back to Jerusalem, We have a picture that we can now show of my wife, Linda, saying goodbye to him in the 20 minutes that he was with us. And then he went and for the next 2 8, if we're going to show that picture, we'd appreciate it. And for the last 12 days, he's been doing the 12-hour shift from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. In the headquarters near the northern Gaza border. And the few minutes we've spoken to him again and again and again, the message he's given us and the message we're giving to you is extremely clear. We are going to win, and we are not afraid, and we are proud and strong and united. And I've been speaking all week to friends of mine from the Israeli left and the Israeli right. And you know, we in Israel, we specialize in elections. We love democracy so much. We've had 4 elections in the last year and a half. And everybody's been emphasizing how dysfunctional Israel is. Everybody's been emphasizing how disunited Israel is. Well, let me tell you, we get moral clarity when the bombs start falling. We get solidarity when the rockets are flying. Over 4,000 rockets from Hamas. And we don't have the moral confusion I'm hearing from so many corners, not just of CNN, not just of CBC, not just in the American and Canadian and British media, not just in the universities, the institutions I love and consider to be my home, but also in so many pockets of the Jewish community. We're told again and again, cycle of violence. Cycle of violence implies tit for tat, implies there's no moral clarity. We're told again and again that the Israeli oppressors are beating up on the Palestinian oppressed. We're told again and again, especially by my friends in the United States, too many of my Jewish friends in the United States, that this is a racial issue between the white Israelis, the white privileged Israelis, and the brown Palestinians. And we're told that just like there was a racial reckoning, I'm literally quoting a rabbi's letter, 100 rabbinic students signed this letter saying that just as there's been a racial reckoning in the United States, there's time for a racial reckoning in Israel and in the Middle East and for the Jewish community in the Middle East. And we're told that the cause of this latest conflict is Israeli provocations. Evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. They usually say evictions. They don't say 8 or 10 evictions because they want people to think that it's hundreds of people being evicted. They talk about Al-Aqsa burning, ignoring the fact that it was a tree set on fire by Hamas in the front part of Al-Aqsa, which had nothing to do with the mosque itself. And even my friends who criticize what's going on in Sheikh Jarrah, who criticize what's going on in Al-Aqsa Mosque, who criticize some of the Israeli actions, who have nothing good to say about Bibi Netanyahu, have moral clarity. And where does the moral clarity come from? It comes from, like good arson investigators, understanding the difference between an accelerant in a fire and what arson investigators call the point of origin. The accelerants, and I'm trying to give language that we can use to explain it to ourselves, to our children, to our colleagues, to our friends, and to the media. Accelerants are what we historians would also call proximate causes. The immediate effects. The story, if I can go to an American Civil War analogy, of the fight in the North in the 1860s with John Brown, who was a Northerner, anti-slavery, activist, and quite violent. You could just tell the story of the Civil War, just focusing on the accelerants, but you'd miss the fact that underlying it was slavery, underlying it was racism. And again and again and again, I've read in the Canadian media and the American media and the British media, a story that doesn't comport with the truth because it focuses on the little provocations that preceded the rocket onslaught, but misses some fundamental facts. Fact number 1, Hamas wanted to exploit both what they perceived to be the chaos in Israeli leadership and the ongoing power struggle within the Palestinian world, because Mahmoud Abbas had finally announced elections in the 16th year of his 4-year term of office. And all of a sudden they wanted to show that they were the guardians of Jerusalem. Let's be honest. Israel lives in a very complicated neighborhood and a very complicated reality. At any given day, Hamas could jump on something that's going on in Jerusalem. But why have they jumped on something in the last 2-3 weeks? In order to assert power over the Palestinians and in order to exploit what they perceive to be Israeli weakness. Those are the accelerants. But we in Israel all know, and I can't tell you how moved I was to hear about how many people are on this call, because you in Canada also know that the real cause is not Sheikh Jarrah. And the real cause is not Al-Aqsa. And the real cause is not this lie that Israelis are white-skinned when so many of our brothers and sisters are all multi-hued. And color really doesn't matter because this isn't a racial issue. This isn't a biological issue. This is a national issue. This is a borders issue. And we also know that there are dark-skinned Israelis and light-skinned Palestinians, but it's not the racial issue. They're just trying to inject that in order to demonize us. We all know that the underlying cause of this is the refusal of Hamas, the refusal of Islamic Jihad, the refusal of this so-called moderate Palestinian Authority to accept the fact 73 years after the establishment of the State of Israel that the State of Israel exists. It's the refusal to accept the fact that Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, live. And they don't just target Israelis, as Naomi and Joel pointed out. They target Jews. And they don't just target Israelis and Jews living in the Middle East. They target Israelis and Jews everywhere. In England, 4 people are yelling, "F the Jews, rape their women." I'm sorry to even quote that. And one of my friends says, Linda Lovett, she writes a column, "How come Me Too doesn't include Me Too as well? Where's the cry against the misogyny? Where's the cry against the violence? Why is it the entire civilized world has a consensus against violence, against sexual violence, against terrorism, and somehow there's a special clause when it comes to Israel?" So we know that the underlying cause is the hatred against Israel, the refusal to accept its right to exist, and the delusion of the West that somehow or other, if we only give the Palestinian national movement, and notice I have nothing against Palestinians, I'm talking about their leadership, another piece of the pie, another slice of territory, a little more of Gaza, a little more of Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, then they'll be at peace. They will not accept us until they're willing to accept us. We will not have peace until they really make peace with the fact that we are here and we're not going away, thanks to you and thanks to us, thanks to my son Yoni, and thanks to my son Aviv, who's also serving the army, who went to his commander and said, "You know, if we go in, I'm going in." He said, "Of course," even though they're in training. He said, "Your gun's awaiting." You're on the ready and we're on the ready. And together we'll remain united. And Yaakov Katz of the Jerusalem Post, in tomorrow's Jerusalem Post, details the extraordinary surgical strikes that have occurred again and again and again in this act of self-defense, in this war we didn't seek, in this ongoing war which has just erupted again because it's on Hamas's timetable. And he points out that this campaign is going to be taught in West Point and in military academies all over because we have knocked out their infrastructure. We have knocked out many of their commanders. We faked them out and destroyed their underground series of tunnels. And while we mourn the 60 or so civilian casualties, the current estimates are about 220 Palestinian dead. 160 of them are Hamasnikim and Islamic jihaders who want to kill us, and we have their names. That's a remarkable expression of efficiency, and yet we mourn those we killed. And we also mourn all those, the 12 who were killed on our side. And I'm supposed to apologize now because the numbers are disproportionate. I'm supposed to apologize because I defend my people, because my country defends my people, because you defend our people. I'm supposed to apologize because we build safe houses, we build shelters, and they use their people as bait. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm going to celebrate our commitment to life. Just as we're a vaccination nation, just as we're a startup nation, we're also the nation Sherodef Shalom, that seeks peace. It's so easy to succumb to despair. It's so easy to count how many Jews have betrayed us. It's so easy to count how many reporters have betrayed us. It's so easy to count how many professors have betrayed us, let alone the terrorists. They don't betray us. By the way, they're honest at least. They don't betray us because they're always targeting us. But I refuse to succumb to despair. I love the fact that Joel and Naomi are calling for action and Cija's calling for action. And yes, everything you do, every letter you send, every email you send, every donation you make makes a difference. We hear it, we feel it, we see it as a balance against all this ugliness, all this betrayal. And last week, well, I was so very proud of my children for standing up for the Jewish people. I was so proud of my people for standing up for one another. I confess, I spent a little too much time focusing on those rabbis, those rabbinic students who indeed are betraying us. And I was in a foul mood as Shabbat was coming in. And then I had a Zoom conversation, not with hundreds of you, but just with 13 McGill students. And one of them, who's far hipper than I'll ever be, far more to my left than I'll ever be, started, and she said, you know, I'm in such despair. I'm so sad. It started 3 weeks ago in Meron. When I saw 45 of those Haredim, those ultra-Orthodox, 45 of my people, 45 human beings, 45 Jews killed in a catastrophe. And then it continued with all the tensions in Jerusalem. And now, this war. I'm so sad. And I said to her, I said, thank you for your despair. Thank you for caring. I was so deeply moved. Because together, my despair and your despair leads to hope. It's kind of some kind of mathematical magic. That's the magic of the Jewish people, that wherever we are, we're never alone. The magic of the Jewish people is that we do look out for one another. Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh. The magic of the Jewish people that we know that just as we yelled, Am Yisrael Chai, and Shlach et Ami, the Jewish people live, and let my people go, and the Soviet Jews were freed, so too we yell, Shlach et Ami, let my people go from these evil people, from these evil forces, from these forces of despair. And we say, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people live. And so thank you, because now I'm entering the second Shabbat, not with the chizuk, not with the strength of 13 McGill students, which is powerful enough, but of hundreds of you. And together, we will win. We will not be afraid. We will not be alone. Am Yisrael Chai, Laila Tov. And now it's my honor and my privilege to turn it over to one of our great heroes of Jewish history, who really stands up for Canadian Jewry every which way and stands up for the Jewish people every which way, Shimon Fogel. Toda rabah, Laila Tov.
Gil, thank you. Thank you not only for your inspiring words, shared in the middle of the night, even before the Jerusalem Birds begin their pre-dawn concert. I thank you for your powerful public advocacy on behalf of the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Your leadership, anchored by an unwavering moral compass, is simply extraordinary. Chers amis, alors que nous nous réunissons, on peut sentir un optimisme prudent que les sirènes se tairont, que les communautés assiégées du sud d'Israël connaîtront du répit et la paix, et que partout en Israël, les femmes, les enfants et les hommes pourront enfin quitter leurs abris et leurs bunkers et retourner enfin à la maison. Friends, as we gather, there's guarded optimism that the sirens in Israel will fall silent and that some peace will come to the beleaguered communities in the south, and that throughout all of Israel, women, men, and children can leave their bunkers and shelters and return to their homes. That's no small thing, and it's worthy of some celebration. But of course, we understand that true and lasting tranquility is elusive, and the watchtowers will still have to be manned, so long as those who reject the legitimacy of the Jewish state retain the capacity to do her harm. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and in all candor, we pray too for the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza to end, a people that has been used and abused by its terrorist masters in Hamas. We pray that the toxic formula of hatred for Israel and the Jewish people fed to them from birth will be replaced by a tonic of respectful and genuine commitment to coexistence. But as we express hope for a durable ceasefire to take hold and end the conflict there, we're painfully aware that the battle, which has moved to our country, to our communities from coast to coast, and to our neighborhoods dotted with Jewish schools, synagogues, community centers, daycares, and homes, has just begun. As Naomi noted, it's been frightening, but we dare not cower and hide. It's been disturbing, but we dare not be intimidated from asserting our identity, who we are and what we are, and in doing so with pride. We are Jews, proud Jews, and we're lovers of Zion, connected to the birthplace of our people with an unshakable, unabashed, and enduring bond. And let me tell you why this is so important. Our adversaries seek not only to erase our ties to the land and history of Israel, they seek to erase the presence of Jews altogether. I'm not paranoid by nature, but if we fail to understand their agenda, we will fail to effectively and successfully thwart their goal. And their goal is to shrink our thumbprint. Over the past year, the world has become sensitized in a way never before experienced to injustice suffered by various segments of our society, and in particular, racialized people of color. That situation begs to be addressed, and people of goodwill must be part of that project. But along with the good of that movement has come a contaminated strain that reduces everything to a simple equation of the oppressed and the oppressor. And Jews have been declared the poster child of the oppressors, so they must be rejected and vilified, with their lived experience of oppression denied and suppressed. So Jews must take a test of loyalty before being granted admission to some progressive spaces. You must choose between your commitment to social justice and kinship with the Jewish people and the Jewish state. And when that space shrinks, attention turns to the public square in general. And one cannot present as a visible Jew for fear of being taunted, shunned, and increasingly of late attacked. And when Jews discard the identifiable markers and symbols of their faith and remove mezuzahs from their doors for fear of being vandalized, attention turns to Jewish institutions, where parents worry about the safety of their children in Jewish schools, where people weigh the risk of attending their synagogues, where community centers have to restrict access and movement for fear of attack. Until in the end, Jews can only be Jews secretly, like the Moranos of Spain and Portugal 500 years ago. Ceci est le champ de bataille et l'agenda de ceux qui veulent nous nier notre identité comme individu et comme communauté. That's the battlefield and the agenda of those who would deny us our identity, both as individuals and as a community. Vraiment, nous sommes sur la ligne du front. Et malgré un cessez-le-feu encourageux à 10 000 kilomètres d'ici, la bataille continuera ici. We're indeed on the front lines, and despite a hopeful ceasefire 10,000 kilometers away, the battle will rage on here, and we dare not shrink from the challenge. That's why tonight we express a collective resolve to assert that identity with pride. We're blessed to benefit from the leadership of federations across the country. In the 14 months that we've endured the challenges of COVID, federations have stepped up and provided innumerable services, from the basics like feeding the hungry to securing the funds to sustain communal institutions. And we at cija are especially grateful for the confidence in us and the support they have extended to us in leading the advocacy effort. Federations have been no less engaged in leading us through this challenge. But while they can lead, they cannot succeed without the support of each Jew and each Jewish family across this great country. Meeting the challenges of the day require the direct engagement of each of us, each and every one. So this is what we have to do. You'll observe the screen and the links to the cija website, most especially the dedicated page that provides a comprehensive toolkit for how you can make a meaningful contribution to the effort. Take action. Click through and use the tools that will guide you through connecting with politicians and sharing our message and demand for them to demonstrably stand with us. Use the tools that provide direction on how to engage with media, print, electronic, and social. I think all of us appreciate that the assault on Jews and the wave of hate that has swept across Canada has used social media as its driving engine. Indeed, we call it the digital pogrom. Confronting that campaign requires special attention. Last week, we began a program to support young people who have been especially targeted and who are especially vulnerable. 150 high school and university students attended last week's session. Almost double that are participating in one tonight, concurrent with our own gathering. This program offers them support, guidance, resources, and a safe place to express their fears and share their experience. There's much more that will be done on that front, and we thank the Hillels and federations who've partnered with cija in this initiative. So we urge you to be counted and count yourselves in. Visit cija.ca/takeaction, where you'll find resources including videos and links to share on Instagram, draft letters to the editors and elected officials, and one-click tweets to go out to get our message out. And let's make sure that we do not slide into the habit of only talking to ourselves in a futile echo chamber. Our message has to be broadcast outside our community, to our neighbors, professional and business associates, to politicians and thought leaders, to other faith and ethnic communities. And equally important, to stay current, I urge you to follow cija on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We have tens and tens of thousands of followers, and on these platforms, we share developments and resources in real time. Let me conclude with two more points. We recognize that there is a deeply felt desire for members of the Jewish community to come together at this time of crisis, both in Israel and here in Canada. We urge communities to be directed by their local public health rules with regard to gatherings. Local communities should consider well-grounded and thoughtful options that will provide their members with an opportunity to both express their solidarity and to engage in meaningful action. And finally, let me share the other element of our program. Yesterday, many of us were buoyed by the unqualified support expressed by Aaron O'Toole, leader of the opposition, and some of his cabinet colleagues, his caucus colleagues, in a meeting that the Conservative Party of Canada organized with members of the Jewish community. This morning, along with our Federation partners and colleagues of B'nai B'rith and Friends of Rosenthal, we met with the senior leadership of the Prime Minister's office and leading members of the Liberal cabinet and caucus. Their support for our community confronted with the wave of hate echoed what we heard yesterday. But they're the government, and to them rests the responsibility to take action in response to that eruption of hate that promises not to end anytime soon. So we presented a set of asks. I want to share the main one with you this evening because its implementation holds the potential to make a monumental difference. We are calling on the Prime Minister to convene an emergency summit on antisemitism that will include the political leadership at both the provincial and municipal levels, a true all-of-government effort, and establish a comprehensive program to combat Jew hatred, the oldest and most enduring hate the world has ever experienced. We want that program to include an obligatory educational component that teaches children about our history, our experience, our suffering, and our triumphs. If other lived experiences merit exposure, then ours most certainly does. We want Canada to undertake a campaign on social media literacy that teaches what is acceptable and what is not, and why it is not. Here in Canada, we did it for marijuana during the process of its legalization, insulating our children from the dangerous aspects of social media abuse deserves no less. And we want the establishment of a complementary program to the SIP, the Security Infrastructure Program, that enhances the capacity of our community to take ownership of our own security. Models of such programs that have succeeded in the UK and Australia inform what can be done here to great effect. And make no mistake, if we do not pursue this path to empowerment and ownership, the alternative is Belgium and France, where national police and the military have to stand guard at every Jewish school, shul, and store. We need you to signal your support for these asks. We need you to demand that our political leaders stand with us in word, but also in deed. We need you to count and count yourselves in. Thank you, and God bless us all.
Shimon, thank you. My name is Jeff Rosenthal, and I am the other co-chair of cija. Shimon, you, Naomi, and Gil have reminded us that we can and must act together at this critical moment. Jews, and only Jews, have the right to define what constitutes anti-Semitism. We've always known that there is no distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Our lived experiences and the experiences of our forefathers and ancestors confers a unique alertness to this threat. And we've always known that standing together and calling on our friends to stand with us is the only way to combat that threat. Federations in every community of Canada are fully seized with this critical issue before us. We want to take this opportunity on their behalf and for cija to thank the many generous donors whose support makes this work possible. If we've learned one thing over the last 2 weeks, it's the blinding speed with which our community can be faced with a crisis. And furthermore, we've learned over the last 14 months of this ongoing pandemic how effective we can be when we work together as a community to face a common threat and advance a shared goal. Tonight, you've heard that we are asking you to act, to write to our Prime Minister asking that he convene an emergency summit on anti-Semitism, to speak to your friends, to contact your local newspaper, and to speak to the principal of your children's school. At the conclusion of our event this evening, the web address for the Take Action resource page will be shown on the screen. Please write it down, go to the website, and pick an activity. Ask your friends and family to do the same. We must affirm our collective and individual rights as Canadians to live in peace and security, free from the harassment and menace that have been on display for these last weeks. We must work together. Now is the time. Thank you for everyone for taking the time to join us tonight. This is critically important. If you have questions that have not been addressed here tonight, please post them on the website and we'll endeavor to answer them. May this new ceasefire be a lasting one, and this meeting is now adjourned. Have a good evening.